Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Hope Looks Up Bible Study with Dr. Tom Haney on Tuesday, June 18, 2024. The Hope Looks Up ministry mission is to form a ministry geared to give hope, encourage, educate, uplift, and point people to Jesus Christ for life direction. My name is Chuck Eaton. I am pleased to host the Hope Looks Up Bible Study both in person and on YouTube. To accomplish our mission, we conduct these studies live in person and on YouTube. Complete study notes are made available after each lesson. And for more information on our ministry, please refer to our website at hopelooks.org. Today, we continue with our 9-week summer study titled God Called to America and God's Answers. This is the third lesson titled The Attack on Family. We are glad you joined us today. There are two parts to our study, teaching and prayer time. Prayer time follows teaching and is optional for those who have prayer needs. If you have questions or have a prayer request, there's forms on the table. Please fill it out and we'll pick those up after the teaching. We will now begin with a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord. It is always a good day when we can come together to study your word. With all that's happening in our world and all the things that we are having to deal with these days, it's really good to spend some time studying your word to find out what you have for us. Please bless all those participating today, both in person and on YouTube. And as we continue to study, may God's call to America please guide and help us to understand your message on this very important topic. May we apply what we've learned and share the hope we have with others. In Jesus' name, Tom.
Well, thank you, Chuck, and it's good to be back with you. And I'll give you just a quick report. We had a wonderful anniversary. We went to the Inn at the Up the Creek, or I guess the Up the Creek Wine Bistro, it's really called. And it was a lot of fun. The flat tire the next day over to Cottonwood wasn't quite as much fun. But you know, it's nice to be old enough that you can afford AAA, and so you do nothing and they do everything. That's kind of a blessing all the way around. And then we got to help Cottonwood's economy by getting several tires. So it was just a good day all the way. Did get a chance to tour the Cottonwood facility of Christian Care, and just want to let you know it's a very nice area up there. Very doing a good job, and hopefully we'll have some connection with even more there. So we did find from all of that, and then my wife, for Saturday night after we got back home, decided to take off her shoes, which she usually does, and in the process fell over and broke her wrist. So she's not with us. We see the specialist tomorrow. We had our nice 4 hours in the ER, which, you know, all of you have gone through that. So anyhow, thanks for keeping us in prayer. We appreciate it. Next time, could you? No, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm glad that you've joined us as we take a look at God's call to America and God's answers. The cultural wars in America are quite real. And today we want to look at a four-pronged cultural attack. Now, I suppose I could have chosen some others, but these four seem to me to be things that have really been prevalent and are things that are very destructive to the family and this four-pronged cultural attack on the family in America. Let's start with something that I think is rather unique. Public opinion polls of the last 25 years show an interesting inconsistency in American attitudes about the family. Most people in the country, in survey after survey, believe that the family as an institution is in serious trouble. But at the same time, they're certain that their own family is doing fine. Now, it does mirror some other surveys that have been taken. For instance, the survey of how many good drivers do you think we have in the United States is always below 50%. How good are you at a driver is almost always rated somewhere in the 80 and 90%. So obviously it's everybody else that's creating all the trouble on the road. But I think there's even more than this that I want to talk about. A survey of the Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company produced the same kind of results. When asked to assess the strength of family values in the society at large, The people replied a gloomy portrait of 65% felt those values were declining, with heavy majorities agreeing with the statement, it's harder to be a parent than it used to be. While the same people radiated optimism and satisfaction of their personal families. In this study, 67% described themselves as very or extremely satisfied with their own family life. Identical percentages rated the relationship with their children as good or excellent. And a recent Gallup poll within the last 5 years found 93% consider family life very important, with a similarly hefty percentage saying that spending time with family members, 91%, produced for them the greatest sense of fulfillment in their lives. Well, we might ask ourselves, why do these conflicting concepts coexist? How can the overall conditions of the American family possibly be so bad when a majority of the citizens of America feel so richly satisfied in their relationships? One columnist said this perplexing attitude prevails is, I'm okay, but you're not syndrome. Hundreds of millions of Americans apparently believe their pleasant domestic relationships represent a blessed exception, a rare island of sanity, and an ocean of insecurity and unhappiness. Why should so many assume the family is falling apart when my own firsthand knowledge seems to be that things are going well? Well, the answer, I believe, involves the influence of the popular culture and the impact that it has on family values. And I would say that many times, many adult Americans do not have quite the involvement with popular culture that their children and grandchildren have, and therefore there might be a little bit more of a disconnect there than we actually believe. Whether we talk about entertainment media, written media, accepted normal lifestyles, or even the general discussion of many people, we immediately see that popular culture clearly demonstrates an uncompromising contempt for conventional family values. The music industry shamelessly promotes promiscuity. Motion pictures focus relentlessly on family dysfunction and divorce, and television programs broadcast the deadly message that kids know better than their dotage and irrelevant parents. So the contrast between private contentment and public pessimism allows this huge, vast chasm of their own worldview and the worldview of popular culture. Those popular culture views have become so deeply ingrained in our national consciousness that few Americans even dismiss them as destructive distortions, which they really are. Let's try leading the way in this promotion of destructive family values by popular cultural ideas in the last 25 years has been the proliferation of sexual adventurism and the focus on physical pleasure as an end to itself, in the words of popular music, and the focus on the power of lust. This willingness to not only embrace promiscuity, but to present it as the only option has been destructive. I will not quote any of the songs that glorify promiscuity. They're filthy. They're just absolutely unbelievable over the last 25 years. But suffice it to say, they're way beyond raunchy lyrics. They're way beyond obscene material. They openly support date rape, obscene use of females, sadomasochism, including genital injuries for the female, death for the female, and the injury of the female partner. How that made it into popular music as a way for you to express yourself is way beyond me. Professor Alan Bloom has written extensively about the rock and roll industry and concludes that the business has all the moral dignity of drug trafficking. In the closing chapter of his book, The Closing of the American Mind, he paints this unforgettable picture. Picture a 13-year-old boy sitting in a living room at his family home, doing his math assignment while wearing his headphones. He enjoys the liberties that have been won through the centuries by the alliance of philosophical truths, meaning the things that our nation was founded on, and political heroism, consecrated by the blood of martyrs. He's provided with comfort and leisure living in the most productive economy ever known to mankind. Science has generated the secret of nature in order to provide him with the marvelous, lifelike electronic sound and image reproductions that he's enjoying. And in what does all this progress culminate? A pubescent child whose body throbs with orgasmic rhythms, whose feelings are articulated in these words are called hymns here about the joys of onanism, that's masturbation, or in the killing of parents, that's ridiculous, whose ambition it is to win fame and wealth by imitating the drag queen who makes the music. In short, life is made into a non-stop, commercially pre-packaged sexual fantasy of promiscuity and violence. Probably the worst part about that is that's going on while the parents are sitting on the couches and the family is having what they consider a good time. The erotic references on network television are not nearly as intense nor as omnipresent as those in popular music, but to a surprising extent, they convey the same underlying message. The promiscuous sex should be viewed as an end to itself, a glorious form of recreation that has nothing to do with responsibility or commitment. In fact, television treatments of romantic relationships strongly suggest that sensuality is most satisfying when it is shared outside of marriage, and that long-term relationships serve to diminish the pleasure of each partner in the relationship. Anyone who doubts that commercial TV regularly and powerfully encourages casual, promiscuous sex is someone who hasn't been watching commercial TV. Whether it is daytime TV with the potpourri of tangled love affairs, or nighttime TV where perfect strangers are having intimate relations the day they meet, or even sitcoms where promiscuity is the accepted behavior of children and parents, the message is overwhelming. This is something that all of you should be doing. Well, what does God say in answer to the temptation of promiscuity? First, God is very clear. 2 of the 10 commandments speak to it very clearly, speaking of the sin of adultery and the sin of coveting. The idea of indiscriminate sexual relationships is forbidden in many ways in the Bible, starting in Leviticus and going all the way through Revelation. The Bible speaks very clearly to men in Proverbs 5:15 through 20, where Solomon is addressing his sons and specifically says, "May your fountain be blessed. May you rejoice in the wife of your youth. Why, my son, be intoxicated with another man's wife? Why embrace the bosom of a wayward woman?" The Bible says that a promiscuous person is one who is living only in the earthly nature. Colossians 3:5 and lists many things that are in this earthly nature that are to be put away as we become Christians, including sexual immorality, impurity, evil desire. And then Paul says they're all idolatry. Now, all you have to do is read just briefly through the Old and New Testament to realize almost all idolatry facing pagan world was sexual. Whether it was worshiping Baal, or whether it was worshiping in the high places, or whether it was the Ashereth, or whether it was goddess Diana who became Athena. It is just over and over. It is just a form of idolatry very often in the Bible. The teaching of Hebrews 13:4 sums up the teachings that I think God has about sexual promiscuity in our lives. Hebrews says marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. Promiscuity has often been the attraction to idolatrous beliefs. Historically, it is the basis of most idolatry. Even the children of Israel, when they decided to let loose and go crazy, almost always ended up in sexual promiscuity, whether it was building the calves and worshiping the calves while Moses was getting the 10 Commandments, or a variety of other ways. It just was what was happening. It is opposed to the teaching of God. God never promotes promiscuity in any way. We'll deal with that a little bit later, because of the effect that it leaves in a life. The second cultural attack against the family has been the maligning of marriage. The motion picture industry has presented men as cruel and domineering husbands that need to be killed to escape them. We all saw Julia Roberts work her way away from this terrible man who traced her down and found her, and in a bloody scene at the end, she killed him. That was one of about 30 movies in a 5-year genre where the same thing was happening. It's just amazing. They have had a series of movies, Stepfather 1, Stepfather 2, Stepfather 3, to show that when a family falls short of what a man wants, he might just have the right to kill them all. The handsome husband has also been the lead, and although he is impeccably handsome and presents himself well to the outside world, he is seen as cold-hearted and often a bloody beast under the surface. And the made-for-television special movies glorify all of this. Every one of them have some part of this malignment of the family going on and some terribly dysfunctional family concept that is causing people to be killed or to kill or do some other things. It's a theme that surfaces in film after film, showing couples who enjoy superficially sound relationships, but in the world of today's feature films, marital bliss is most often a trap and a deception in which your spouse may become your deadly enemy virtually overnight. Husbands are most often characterized as the betraying and dangerous partners, but wives also do their share of homicidal double dealing. Many other films highlight the emptiness and cruelty of married life. We move to the point in films where these same events often happen between people, but no marriage is involved. It is just the unwinding of a bad relationship, homosexual or heterosexual, with the idea that without marriage it's easier to get away from this awful person. So instead of making it less of an attack on marriage, it's making it more of an attack on marriage. It's as though if you get into a bad relationship, if you're not married, you're going to be better off. Well, why would the entertainment media have such a bias towards happy and successful marriages? Well, once again, there's a subtle underlying current here in the cultural wars that we need to see. The industry has decided that happy marriages do not sell. The most striking aspect of this is the avalanche of major movies that portray troubled and nightmarish marriages, or even the absence of a marriage, is that the impact is seldom counteracted by pictures that portray relationships between husbands and wives in a more positive terms. No sane observer would ever suggest that the entertainment industry made only films that glorify marriage as an uninterrupted panorama of sweetness and light. We all know that we need to see the problems too. People do encounter real problems in intimate relations, and they are dramatic and they're absorbing, and so that isn't to be ignored. We should be addressing it in our pulpits. We should be addressing it in psychology. We should be addressing it in a lot of ways. Nevertheless, the current fascination with the most disastrous, bizarre, and destructive family situations goes well beyond the normal tendencies to focus on the dramatic, real-life difficulties and amounts to an attack against the very institution of marriage, especially a marriage between a man and a woman. Interesting, none of those films, since we've had same-sex marriage, none of those films show two women or two men having that series of problems where they have to end up killing one or the other at the end of the film, isn't it? There is a lot of subtle underlying currents. That's what I want you to see. It is truly a cultural war. It's really an attempt to brainwash at least the next generation if it doesn't work on ours. It also shows that the percentage of shows, movies, and TVs where the lead characters are single, widowed, or divorced has been very much increasing. Although almost 2/3 of the United States is either married or has been married, the percentage of lead roles where the person is happily married is almost non-existent. Innocence and decency were the early marks of television, because television wanted to be invited into your living room and wanted you and your children and grandma and grandpa or whoever was there to feel very happy and very warm and fuzzy about them. But those traits were soon replaced by deeply troubled families, marriages, and relationships that highlighted the problems that were shown and belittled the fact that any happiness was present. So what is God's answer to the present cultural war about marriage between a man and a woman? First, God instituted marriage, and he created woman so that man would have a valid and complete partner. God gave Adam an assignment. It was not a minor assignment, it's a very major assignment. He asked him to name all the animals. Now, I heard a speaker one day say that when Adam started, it was really quite a challenge. So the animals' names just rolled off: rhinoceros, hippopotamus, opossum. But by the end of it, Adam got kind of tired. And so it was bug, fly, fish. I have no idea if any of that's true or not, but we know that God gave Adam that job, and Adam did it. However, when he completed the job, he appealed to the Lord, and he said to God, there is no one in the group for me. I've named all these animals. There's no partner for me. So God miraculously took a large piece of Adam's side and used it as the raw material to make Adam a partner. God put them together and pronounced the relationship good. God has always been one who supports marriage. The only exception in the Bible is when it takes away the faith of a believer by marrying an unbeliever. That's the only exception God puts in to why he's not pro every marriage. Once again, the summation of God's thinking about marriage is found in Hebrews 13:4. Marriage should be honored by all, the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. The Bible also tells us the answer of God as to when we should get married. And here's what it says. If anyone is worried that he might not be acting honorably towards the woman he's engaged to, and if his passions are too strong and he feels he ought to marry, he should. They should get married. 1 Corinthians 7:36 is pretty clear. I don't hear it talked about much. I don't hear it preached about ever. But it's certainly something that God says. He is so pro-marriage that he just, if you're burning up with desire for each other, get married. Move ahead with life. The third cultural attack on the values of the traditional family has been the encouragement of illegitimacy. The move towards the promotion of out-of-wedlock births has expanded in the cultural trendsetters of our nation. It became widespread in the 80s and 90s among actors, and it continues to today. Now, we have a lot of high publicity marriages among Hollywood people, but we have many high paid Hollywood people who never married. Raised a family, raised grandchildren, never married. It is widespread in singers, in sports, in professors, in influencers. What was once a society that concealed the most obvious of moral peccadillos and was often hypocritical by doing it has really changed. To a surprising extent, this is almost reversed today. A conventional marriage might cause more embarrassment to an aspiring sex symbol than casually conceiving a baby with a boyfriend. These challenges play a strong role in the private life of our cultural trendsetters. Surprisingly, television has played an even more prominent role than feature films in promoting childbearing outside of marriage. And Karen James, a TV critic, said it well when she said, obviously the boom in single parenthood means that pregnancy has replaced weddings as that special event used to perk up ratings in the show. The consequences have been severe. The National Center for Children of Poverty, the American Enterprise Institute, and the National Center for Criminal Justice combined reports to show some of the devastating handicaps faced by the offspring of unwed mothers. These children are more than twice as likely to repeat a grade in school, 33% to 13%. They are more likely than children living with both parents. They are more than 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled from school, 17% to 5%, and more than 4 times more likely to be assigned to a juvenile correctional facility. And this one was rather shocking to me. Amazingly enough, children raised by never married mothers were nearly 3 times more likely, 39 to 14%, to spend more than 10 years on welfare than children raised by single divorced mothers. So we see what a price the children and our nation is paying for the increase in illegitimacy. Well, what would God say to America about the encouragement of illegitimacy, and what would be his answers? When God ruled the people as their God and their leader, we call it a theocracy, the Hebrew nation, he gave several laws that would apply to this question. He said that those who had sexual relations, even in the worst of circumstances, and just read Leviticus and Deuteronomy, you know, if you're in the city, if you're in the country, where you can call for help, where you can't call for help, but in all of those areas, the worst of circumstances, if they were not married or pledged to be married, they were to get married. So he put that child's legitimacy, if there was a child, above even that relationship. He dealt with all the circumstances that could produce a child and asked that the people marry and raise the child together. God loves the illegitimate child. But when he was in charge of a nation, he gave laws that would keep the number as low as possible. The last great cultural attack on the family has been the undermining of the relationships between parents and children. No idea has been more aggressively and completely promoted in films, popular music, and television than the idea that children know best, that parents are corrupt, hypocritical clowns who must learn decency and integrity from their enlightened offspring. And quite honestly, especially in television and some movies, it's often been a teenager. I've never met too many of those teenagers, but that's what has been shown in the films. In addition to the common comical roles as bumblers and bozos, mom and dad are also frequently portrayed in a far darker, more disturbing light. The emphasis on the common statement that whatever a child says is true, they have not learned to lie yet, has forced many changes. The school system, the bus drivers, public transportation people, and many others have all had to mount cameras to verify what really happened when a child and an authority disagree on the facts. And I know I've talked to one of you here who had that experience. And I just need you to know that even though that passes out there as common culture, that children aren't old enough to know how to lie yet, it's not true. It is literally not true.
Little preschoolers can lie.
Yeah, so the idea that we have now bought into the concept that somehow children should be teaching parents has been devastating. Ultimately, the idea that children will teach their parents and adolescents will show the way for the rest of us is unfair to those on both sides of the generation gap. Young people, however, are its chief victims, since the very idea that kids know best forces them to accept intolerable burdens. They are expected to reinvent the wheel for a weary humanity, denied the benefits of the experience of those who have gone before. In the past, the process of growing up has been considered difficult enough in its own right, without taking on additional responsibility for saving unfortunate adults. And one of the things I want you to remember is simply this. Many of the children who are born to unwed mothers, or many of the children who are raised by single mothers, also have a very minimal amount of grandparents. So they not only miss the parents' care, they miss that doting, overdoing, overgenerous, love them and send them home effect that grandparents have in their lives. So it has had a terrible effect on that whole process. Those who are trying to shape culture by completely changing culture are adding a significant contribution to the ongoing confusion about marriage in America. Their anti-family messages promoting promiscuity, maligning marriages, encouraging illegitimacy, and undermining parental authority may not make it impossible to maintain a solid marriage or to raise decent kids, but they certainly make it harder than it has to be. Well, what does God say about putting kids in charge or the family first? First, over 20 times in the Old Testament and 7 times in the New Testament, God commands parents to teach their children. It is an obvious desire of God that all parents teach their children, and never once does God command children to teach their parents. In a passage that explains what God really wants with children and parents, Solomon writes to his sons, "Children's children are a crown to the aged." Isn't that true? Grandchildren are a delight. We love them. And parents are the pride of their children. That's what God said we should be. Parents are the pride of their children. God has the prophet Malachi write about the birth and life of his son Jesus Christ as he ends this prophetic book in the Minor Prophets that ends the Old Testament. In fact, I'm quoting you the last 2 verses that are in the Old Testament. "See, I will send the prophet Elijah," Jesus meaning John the Baptist and then Jesus coming with him, "to you before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to the children and the hearts of the children to the parents." Now, we've heard that and a lot of times stopped. Listen to the last half of the verse. "Or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction." I should tell you how much value God places in families, how much God places in marriages, how much value God places in the relationship of children to their parents and parents to the children. The destruction of the family will be the destruction of any nation. Perhaps the intention of God is best summed up by these words from Colossians. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. So I once again want us to realize this area of the culture war has gone poorly for those of us who have wanted to see the values stay much more like they are. And I just want us to make that an intentional part of our prayer. Chuck, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Tom. I just am so blessed that we have a group like this where we can hear some truth that you don't get many places these days. We're so inundated with the false teachings that are out there in the media, like Tom says. Well, thank you for coming today. We'll be posting this on our YouTube site on Thursday, and the notes will be made available next Sunday. And with that, we'll turn the meeting over to Kathy, who is in for Linda with the prayer time.